Thank you guys so much for making this work super last minute too. And I know you're like in the final stretch,
We are.
which is so exciting. I vividly remember reading your guys's story and telling you guys on the phone that you guys got a grant. So it's so fun to see it like actually come to, fruition. So
Yeah,
Definitely.
we're so excited. It's wild. We were just saying, like, oh my gosh,
It's blown by.
it's like right around the corner. It's crazy.
I
Yep.
know. And like at this point, if the baby was born, like it's going to be healthy. So
Yeah,
that's always
Yep.
like such a relief. You're like, I've crossed all the milestones I'm supposed to. If
Mhm.
it comes early, it'll be maybe a little bit small, but like we're good.
We're so
Hmm.
thankful.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yay. Okay, well, we were trying to think of what to do for National Infertility Awareness Week, which is next week. And last year we did a panel all week where we interviewed different people in the field. So we interviewed like a male infertility specialist,
Mhm.
Mm.
um, for my fertility doctor that I went to, who specializes more in like PCOS and women's infertility, and then we interviewed a surrogacy agency, a therapist. So we kind of touched on a lot of like the components that make up the journey. And so this year, when we were thinking about what to do, we're like, it's really fun and interesting to hear from the like people that have actually done it. We all talked about how when like we were kind of entering the beginning stages of it, we were like, wanting to know everything, like reading all the blogs and reading every like website, like what happens if this happens and if I get this. And I joined every Facebook forum and I I was just anywhere I could find any information about like what my future possibly could hold. I
Yeah.
wanted to do that. And
Hmm.
so we thought this would be interesting to do like somebody from all the different areas, like embryo adoption, surrogacy,
Yeah.
adoption, IVF, maybe
Yeah.
people that haven't had success yet.
Mhm.
So that my first question for you is, what were the treatments you tried, and what led you to what you ended up doing to be successful?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about this. I think I'll answer this one maybe better since we are a male infertility pregnancy.
Hmm.
So for us and our situation, it was basically neither of us knew that. So when we got married at 24, we thought it would be like everybody else, that we'd probably get pregnant on accident before we planned to, planned to have a baby or whatever. And I was going through grad school at the time. She was working. She was a nanny of a newborn. And so at that time, we just kind of thought, well, this will be us soon. We'll have a baby and I'll be trying to work three jobs, like everybody else in grad school. But it just time rolled on, and then we realized, hmm, something's not normal here. And we didn't know, and we couldn't tell why. And so she got tested, and she was totally fine. And I guess this could be more of a guy thing, but for me, it's like, well, I'm not going to get tested because this is a problem that we're going to solve on our own. And I had a family member who had waited too late to have children, like my mom's age. And so I didn't really want to be in that situation either. But it wasn't that I felt it demeaning. It was just more like this is my problem to solve. So I wanted to solve it. And so I didn't know that it was my problem, but I think we pretty much knew that it was my problem. I wasn't ready to admit that it was my problem. And I was already into health things. So I was like, well, there's got to be some cutting edge approach or treatment or supplement or, something that I can do to solve this problem. And we tried everything under the sun.
Yeah, under the direction too of different physicians.
Yeah.
We were working with some different doctors and
But not related to
studying different
fertility
things.
proper in the beginning. In the
Hmm.
beginning, it was just more of, well, I don't seem to fit into any of the categories of people that have serious problems because it didn't have any symptoms, not necessarily. And so, um, basically, we happen to be near a great Christian university, and I happen to work there. And a guy he was technically the dean of counseling at the school. He basically reached out to me a couple of years ago. We had lunch one day, and he said, you're not doing your wife any favors waiting any longer. You're 38 years old. You need to just go get tested. Suck it up and just go and get tested. And because it came from a friend, I wasn't offended. I was like, you know what? It's like I'd heard it from the first time. It'd like, I probably have known this for years, but it just hit me differently. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So we went to a world-class I guess it was technically a
Special.
world-class specialist on the East Coast who happened to be about an hour from us. And he was renowned in like
Could you
peer-reviewed paper.
share who that was, just if there's
Yeah.
other people on the East Coast?
Yeah, we went to Dr. Ryan Smith at UVA, University of Virginia. So UVA for us would be like a Duke. So both of those are pretty close to equal distance to us.
Okay.
UVA was just a little closer. And we had some really close friends who had gone to that doctor for treatable male infertility issues, and they have 4 children naturally. And so we were like, well, this guy also seems to be best of the best, worked for them. And then I went in, and at first they thought I had a tumor. And but I had brought all of my literature and my own tests with me, and then they were like, "Well, honestly, to fork off, they were like, we don't know what you did, but you fixed your tumor problem, but you didn't fix your fertility problem." And so they said, "Hey, we'll give you 90 days to get in the gym, do every supplement you want, and we'll do a blood test before and after to see if it fixes it."
Yep. And the interesting thing too is that, he didn't even really suspect or question testing for a genetic issue until
None.
after, we had kind of exhausted so many different things. We had been to different doctors and tried different things. So for us, it wasn't so much of a what treatment did you try? It was just a whole lot of testing, and we never could determine what was actually going on until finally,
Until Ryan Smith.
yeah,
And
Dr.
we had
Smith.
done East and West at that time, tried all of the Eastern stuff, all the natural things, all the Western things that weren't chemical or surgical.
Yeah.
And
And then he said, let's
he's
try
like,
a
let's do a genetic
genetic.
test. And I
Yeah.
was like,
He's
nah,
like,
I don't think so. It was expensive, but I was like, I don't think so because my doctor was like, you don't have this.
and he even said, I don't think you have it, but we can try it.
Comes back and he's like, you are 100% 47XXY Klinefelters, which didn't mean anything to me except like uh, you're broken. And at first I was like, well, that's not good. What does this even mean? Because I was like, I don't have, to be very transparent, I don't have female organs, I don't have female hormones. So I'm like, what does this mean? I have a different, sex chromosome. So I was,
Mhm.
I was not really mad, but I was just confused for like maybe a hot minute. And then because I use AI a lot for my job, I just started going down the rabbit hole of, well, what does this actually mean? And then I realized, well, there's a lot of people that have this. This 1 in 600 men have it, but only 1 in 2,400 ever find out because no one ever goes to get tested. And you'd have to run a very specific test.
Yeah.
And for some people like me, I don't need to go on hormone replacement therapy because my body makes a sufficient amount. But for most people like me, they do. So most of those guys, they find out when they have trouble going through puberty, but since I didn't, for someone like me, I didn't. So for our actual journey, it was more of, well, as a Christian, I came to the conclusion of like, well, this makes a lot of sense as to why I was always the sort of the 98-pound weakling, so to speak, trying to always be big and strong. I was like, well, my body just doesn't produce enough hormone, and now I know why. And so recognizing that this is the way that God made me helped me to just feel okay. It wasn't like I had done anything to hurt myself and prevented us from having a baby. It was recognizing, no, you're exactly normal for you. And in fact, for people like you, you're at the top end of healthy people, which was just such a relief for me in my life and us in our marriage. And then that same person said, well, hey, have you ever heard of frozen embryo transfer? And we were like, no, we had never heard of that. And then, I just passed on to her on how we went, kind of ended up going down that path.
Yeah. Yeah, so it started us on the journey for embryo adoption. So that is the treatment that we tried and have had success with. So I'm 35 weeks pregnant and soon to be welcoming our little boy into our home.
Hmm. It was the first attempt too.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Really. That's,
First attempt at 39 years old. No, and all
yeah,
natural,
sneaking it
100%.
right in there.
Yep, right in there again.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Um, I think that a lot of people can resonate with that. I know there's quite a few of us on the board who have male infertility, and I know.
It's more common than what you hear about. Normally you hear about female infertility.
Mhm.
From a male infertility perspective, it's just not as discussed.
I don't know
Yeah,
anybody that has it personally. So it's probably that the guys just don't talk about it and the ladies are just more free to share, but no one will
I
know
think
that
that
it's
is
okay unless
true.
you
I
share.
think that's very true. I don't think men like talking about it. So I really appreciate you talking about it right here because I mean, it's like 50%.
Yeah.
It could go either way.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that when I have anybody that's questioning if infertility is in their future, I'm like, it's so easy for them to go get tested.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
go get tested. And if all the
Right.
sperm looks fine, then you can move on to something that's more serious, or you can just keep trying and just like get to it then. But I'm like, it's so easy. There's so many things that can go wrong with women. And there's test after test after test. And one test with men most of the time can tell you like you're good or you're not.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you opening up about that. I'm so happy that embryo adoption ended up working for you guys. Um, let's see. Did you try anything else before this besides like the supplements and kind of like the Eastern and Western? Did you do IUI or Clomid or any
We did
of
it
those?
in Yeah, we did it and the reason for that too, like he was sharing, is because we did a whole lot of testing. I started out, with all the rounds of testing for women.
Physical and hormonal.
Yeah, and everything came back normal for me. And so we kind of then just got hung up on his side of it. But yeah, and even when we were going through the process of embryo adoption, the clinic where we had gone to see Dr. Smith, they're kind of affiliated, they're close by. They offer natural cycle frozen embryo transfers. And that was just a godsend for us because that was kind of a big deterrent. I mean, with me being healthy, hormonally and physically and everything, we really wanted to find somewhere that offered the natural cycle process. And there are really just not many clinics that do that.
Can you
So
kind of explain what that natural cycle is? I don't think that was even an option when I was having my
Oh
kids.
yeah. Yeah,
Should
because
have
it's
done too.
it's it's really not common. Like there are literally, I think, only a handful in the country that offer it. So um a frozen embryo transfer typically follows the same process of IVF, in the sense of, you have to go through the shots and they're going to stop your cycle and then they'll kick it back up again. And, you have to be very timed. And there's just a lot involved in the hormone treatments. A natural cycle is really just tracking your body and your natural hormone cycle. So we just timed everything with my menstrual cycle and then implanted the frozen embryo on the day that we would have conceived naturally. So I
Like
didn't
on
have
when
to
you're
do,
ovulating, is what you're saying.
That
yeah,
shot, that one
yeah.
shot.
Yeah, so I had to do one shot just to make sure that I ovulated exactly at a specific time.
Like
But
your
my
trigger
body,
shot.
yeah,
Yep.
yes. Yes, that's yeah, that.
Okay.
But yeah,
In the
that was
stomach.
that
Yep.
was the only thing that I had to do just to make sure that we timed it exactly on the day.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that was it. So, it just follows your natural menstrual cycle.
So you didn't do progesterone and oil or estrogen, like
I
estrates
did.
or anything.
No, I didn't do
Not to get pregnant.
right. Yeah, progesterone, they wanted me to do progesterone after the implantation,
Mhm.
just to make sure that it, took.
Very
Yeah.
small
But
amount.
it was very small and I only did it for a short amount of time. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I didn't have all the crazy fluctuations and, just all the things that you hear about, that come with a typical frozen embryo transfer. So,
Yeah.
This clinic is really good too. Virginia Fertility and IVF, and it is anonymous and such too. If people choose to do that, I mean, it's up to each individual, obviously, where they want to go.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
Uh,
might recommend them.
yeah. So how did you find your embryo? Was that a hard process?
For us, it
No.
wasn't. As Christians, this whole process has been just a giant step of faith for us, a giant journey of faith. And when we found the clinic, it's just right up the road from us, which was just so wonderful.
The
And,
clinic that had embryos that you could adopt? Is that what you're saying?
yep,
It was
yep,
it was the same place I got tested. So it was like the staff at UVA, many of them kind of moonlight at this clinic and they work in both places,
yep.
which is
Okay.
cool.
Yep. Yeah, and so then, we just went with their process, which, we were on a wait list for a while, which was hard. That was really hard to wait.
Yeah.
Because we were just so excited to get started. But, they sent us a list. I think we had 10 different cohorts to choose from. And, for us, we just approached it by prayer and just asking the Lord to lead us.
Mhm.
And we saw the one
We knew right away.
cohort, we both looked at it, and we were like, "Yep, that's the one that we wanted to try." So that part for us, was pretty easy in that sense, which we were really thankful for because we had been stressed out about, like, "Oh, what do how do we pick? How do you decide?" But,
Yeah.
it worked out really easily for us.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who don't understand the process, thankfully for them, happy that they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people that don't understand the process don't understand how like pivotal
Difficult
God
it is.
and deity is in like it feels as if you're cheating the system kind of because there's so much you pick and there's
Mhm.
so much that you manipulate to in order to for it to happen, but at the same time once you've gone through it you understand that it's so inspired and it's such a miracle and it's not
Oh,
you
yeah.
that's doing it and it's not you that's manipulating it or
Yep.
picking because if you did you would have been pregnant 10 years ago, you know?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So,
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when you say you had to wait a long time for while you were on a waiting list, like how long was that? Was it years, months?
No,
It's
definitely
it
not
ended
that
up
long.
it ended up being about 6 months.
Okay.
We were on a wait list. Really what it is this clinic is just pretty popular. There are a
Yeah.
lot of people that,
They're very good.
yeah, they do. Yeah,
One at a
their success rate, I think, is like 70 or 75% compared to
Wow.
the national average, which is around 40. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, they just do a really good job, and they only work with one family at a time. So
Oh,
there were some families ahead of us where they were waiting until they got a heartbeat. And so once they graduated then, from the clinic and had a heartbeat, then it was our turn. So we waited about 6 months until it was our turn to step up and pick our embryo.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was the like the legal side hard of embryo adoption? Did you guys have to hire a lawyer?
Mm-mm.
No,
No.
I would say for me, with more of like formal ethical training, it was just digging through like what are our ethical constraints here? Not that they're doing anything, well, they're doing things that we would not do. Like as Christians, we don't personally believe in abortion. Protestant Christians, strong Protestant Christians, we don't believe in abortion. So even for us, the standard practice I've found worldwide, or at least nationwide, is to perform um, pre-implantation genetic testing. And so for people that don't know what that means, it would mean people that would be like me are aborted. So we got to see kind of the behind the scenes that people like me are discarded so that people that are normal basically have a higher chance of success are preserved. And so could be that's why they have a higher success rate because they do not keep embryos that they don't think will survive the process because it is pretty complicated to go from conception to preservation to not to be too not to sound sacrilegious or anything, but the very nature of life, the very genetic material is that even in the natural process of pregnancy, some eggs don't make it, some sperm don't make it, and even those that connect together, like they don't make it to full, they don't even make it beyond where people even know that it's a positive test. And so I think that when you keep that in mind and you recognize that this is your opportunity to save lives, and you're not the one that making the decision, at least in the case of the frozen embryo, which we would have had a harder time if we had been capable of doing IVF because it's like that's a wrestling and grasping that would be very difficult. And that's why these babies got here in the first place, is because somebody decided to save them and not let them be used for testing or abortion or, you know, cosmetics or whatever. And
Mhm.
we're against that. So for us, we were like, well, which of these babies does God want us to rescue? Because there's 600,000 of them that are frozen nationwide. We just got to figure out which one's ours. And so it's just like all these cohorts, which are in fact, for those that don't know, it's a grouping of embryos associated with one of those couples. And so they may have saved two embryos, they may have saved eight embryos. And in our case, they had already had two live births, and we picked one of them. We didn't really care which one, we just kind of picked one. And God had an unusual sense of humor when it came about time for us to have the transfer, which I'll let her share about if you want. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we actually so within our cohort there were several embryos that were available for adoption, and like he said, we didn't really care which one it was. We just knew that this was the right family. And one thing I want to add to real quick is, we've from the beginning we've just talked about how this child has been loved now by two sets of parents, enough that they allowed him to be adopted
Thank you.
rather than just remaining frozen or discarding or whatever, because it is so expensive to store them as well. But anyway, so we didn't really care which embryo it was. We just knew that this was the right one, and that God would make that clear. And so we went in the day of the transfer. We had to put on the paper what embryo we wanted. And so we just put embryo number one out of, I think there were three or four,
Yeah, 3 or 4.
because they show you the health grade of the embryo and everything. And there were a few of them that were exactly the same, so we just picked number one because it was just number one. And the funny thing was, we went in and they asked us to confirm, all of our information, what we had selected, and she said, "Well, I didn't give you embryo number one. I gave you the one that was the healthiest." And so we were like, okay, that's great. Well, long story short, so we both just really had a sense that we were supposed to have a son
For years.
for years, and we didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what it would look like. We had no idea. We just were going to pursue that goal. And the funny thing is, if we had gotten the embryo that we had selected, it would have been a little girl. We found out way after the fact. But
And
we ended up with a little boy because that was the one that God just sovereignly intervened and gave us. So, yeah, it
it's
was a
pretty
really,
cool.
really cool process. Legally, everything was very easy. We signed some paperwork. Everything is like the moment that you adopt this child, it's yours. That's it. Um,
Yeah.
so that
Once you sign the paperwork, that's the time at
full,
which
yeah.
the baby is legally yours, whether he survives the process or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Um, these are questions that you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but are you thinking you're going to have more children, and is it possible that you can have more from that cohort so the children would actually be siblings?
it is possible that we could do that. I think for us, we just turned 40 this year. And by the time baby's born and, we're at the point where we were ready for another one, I think, for us, it might be a little too late. Like
I waited
we
too
don't
long,
want to, yeah,
unfortunately.
probably don't want to be pregnant at 43-ish or 42, 43. So yeah, we're thankful for this little guy, and we'll always be open if that's something that the Lord would lead us to do. But at this point, we're thinking we're gonna just be the one.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, are you thinking that I feel like my kids are getting older now, and now I'm like, they might understand what IVF means. And I talk about it all the time because, hello, this is my job, my
Yeah.
volunteer job.
Hmm.
So, we're always going to events and where I'm always working on something. And now they're getting old enough that they're like, Mom, what are you working on? And so it's got me thinking lately, like, how am I going to explain to them what that is and why and where and how, all the questions. And
Yeah.
so have you guys thought about that? Does that feel daunting to you? For me
Maybe
at
more to
least,
me, but not to her. Like she's like already had the idea from the very beginning, of how she thinks it would be good to share. And like she's a Christian children's book author, so she's already got ideas of like how to plant seeds of that knowledge as the baby grows and gets
Mhm.
older so that baby understands. And I think one of the analogies we even thought was like, mommy and daddy didn't have all the parts that are necessary to have a baby or something similar like that, where we just start based on whatever knowledge and whatever stage that they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, contextualizing it, for their age, of course, but all of our family, all of our friends, they know that we've been through this process. We plan to share from day one, because we're proud of who he is. We're proud of his story. This is how God made him. This is how he brought him to us. And, one thing I actually, someone mentioned this to me, and I just thought it was a wonderful analogy. Cupcakes. Like, when you're baking cupcakes or you're making cookies, you have to have all the flour and the sugar and all the right ingredients. And so I think when he's younger, that's one thing that we'll probably try to use, like something along that idea. Mommy and daddy didn't have all the ingredients we needed to make a baby, but we prayed about it, and God sent us the right thing that we needed, which was you.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think, recognizing the importance of being honest and open with
Mhm.
him from day one is going to be really important. And we actually, the clinic that we used, they required some mandatory counseling, which I thought was great,
Yep.
Yeah.
to address these kind of issues because it's real. Like this is
Yeah.
gonna be part of his story, part of his life, and he's going to have siblings out there that he might eventually meet one day, and how will we address that and all those kinds of things. So I think just being humble and honest and open with him, and
Yeah.
recognizing the value that
Yeah.
he has for who he is and how God brought him
This is
to
his
life
story.
here.
Yeah.
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 We're just excited about that. It can feel a little daunting if we think like
Yeah.
too far out or think about it all at once, but just a day at a time. And then we know that the questions will come too as he gets older.
Yeah.
Um, but we trust that the Lord will lead us too at that point.
And I can also speak to that just because we did get a lot of biographical information about the family.
Mhm.
So we happen to know, in like without being too, disclosing, we happen to know a lot about where he came from and his family and they didn't really struggle with infertility. It appears that his dad got injured. His biological father was injured. So it sounds more like an emergency situation where they wanted to have children later and so they did what was necessary so that they could. But they were also a fellow Christian family and that was trying to have children, and they have had children. So it's like I won't go into too much detail, but when we look at like who the mom was, look at who the dad was, we look at them, we're like, wow, if you filled out a Myers-Briggs profile, I'm pretty sure that would be me. Like I have a lot in common with like the dad's career and the dad's features, and we didn't go in knowing that necessarily. It's just kind of that they live in this state. We don't know.
Well, as you know, I mean, I feel like you and I can relate on this. Maybe not everyone sees it this way, but um, I felt very guided by the Lord too in the way that we did it. And so it has made me understand like the qualities of God so much more having gone through this
Yeah.
process. And so it would be a shame if I didn't share that with my children as to like how truly miraculous and led and guided I felt to bring them to me. So with that, I just want to ask one final question. What was like one of like the things that you learned going through this experience, or what was like a positive takeaway from your experience?
She's more concise, so I'm gonna let her go.
Oh, I don't know. There's a million things I feel like that we could say, so many positive things to take away. But again, as Christians, that for me has been the biggest thing. Yeah, is the faithfulness of God. Um, the way that he cares for us so intimately. Every detail of this has been miraculous from start to finish. I could go into so many stories.
Insurance, all kinds of things. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. You guys are a big part of our story for
Yep.
that. We're
Huge.
so thankful.
Yes.
Yes. Shameless plug for the Hope for Fertility Foundation.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so everything has just been amazing, but I think from a non-spiritual standpoint, more so too, even I would say one thing for us is it has really strengthened and grown us in our relationship and our marriage when we decided that we wanted to do this and that we were going to cling to each other no matter what happened.
Yep.
That's been such a positive thing. We've just really grown so much through this process together, and it's been just a beautiful thing to see the Lord work in that too for us. Even in our family, our families, like we we kept it a secret the whole time. They had no idea that we were even starting this process. They had no idea until we told
So we told them we wouldn't go on vacation to the
until
beach,
yeah,
and they were paying.
yeah, until we told them we were pregnant. And so
Yep.
they were shocked. But seeing um I'm an only child. My husband has a sister who's not married. So grandkids, we were like the only hope for the family. And
Yep.
kind of just seeing, even the life that this has given them has been really cool as well. And just, you know, walking by faith and trusting the Lord to lead us. It's been awesome.
Yeah, we never felt shame, but there was stress and distress and sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I think that's the one thing that, if you have a healthy marriage, then you're going to get through it, but you're just going to be sad. if you wanted to have children. And if you don't have a healthy marriage, it's going to bring out a lot of stress
Yeah.
because there's a lot of stress. And personally, as a Christian, I think that if you don't find your satisfaction in God, then you're not going to be satisfied with the other person wholly. Like they can't provide you the satisfaction that you need. And it's gonna create the worst out of people when they go through really difficult, traumatic
Yeah.
situations. But for us, through this entire process, from beginning to end, God's really been faithful, and now we've got a baby who
Yeah.
it's been natural the whole way, and he's completely healthy, she's completely healthy, and now we're just waiting for him to grow and come.
That is one thing too, I would say, this journey, while it's been wonderful, it has not been without many tears and many hardships. And, at every step of the journey with the natural cycle process, there was always the possibility that it wasn't going to work, or, like my levels wouldn't be where they needed to be for us to take the next step. And so, infertility is a roller coaster ride journey.
Yeah, emotion.
And, anyone who's in the midst of it or has been or is going to go through it will find that out. Um, so, it's not always roses and puppies. Like it's hard. It was still very hard, but there's always hope. And so I would say that's the one thing too, is to cling to each other and cling to hope, and be content with where you are and who you are first. And if you're able to have a child, that's wonderful and beautiful, but doesn't always work for everyone. you know it's
Yes.
not always it's not always how things come about. So
We had already accepted that before this happened, so
mhm.
we realized that if it wasn't our responsibility to be parents, that we were going to do the best we could to pour into other people who had children,
Yeah.
because society needs that, the world needs that, and
Yeah.
maybe not everybody is a childbearing person,
Yeah.
but you should be a child-loving person and take care of people and watch out for people regardless. And so
Yeah.
we were doing that for a long time, and then we just got this end
Hmm.
of the
Yeah.
mid of life surprise, happy surprise.
Yep.
Yeah. That's so great. I remember us checking in on you guys, being like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, any update?" And you were like, "We're pregnant, but you can't tell
Yeah.
anyone. Our
Okay.
families don't even know, and we're
That
planning
was
not
that
to
was
tell
so
them." And
cute.
I'm like,
Yeah.
we actually get that all the time. We are oftentimes the first people to find out. But
Yep.
I love
That's
how you said that. Cling to each other and cling to hope, because that's why we named ourselves Hope for Fertility, because
awesome.
that's sometimes all you've got is just hope. And so I'm so grateful. I'm so, so grateful that you guys would share your story with us. I think this will help so many people that are out there that are, the stage that they're in, where they're just like, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we, if we choose this, how is this going to end up? It's just all the stress of the unknown. And then just seeing someone that's gone through it and done it and is just fine. Like the marriage is fine, the baby is fine. You're like, oh.
Made it. Yeah.
So I'm so grateful you guys would open up about this and be so transparent about this journey. Is a little bit of a different journey than a lot of people. A lot of people start with the IVF thing, and they try and they try and they try IVF for so long, and then it ends up into embryo adoption or adoption. So
Yeah.
I think that this gives a lot of people hope that if whatever they're trying currently, if it goes to this next treatment, like what you guys have done, that it can still be so beautiful and it can still be just the way it's meant to be. So
Yeah,
thank you
for
guys for
sure.
sharing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
thanks for letting us
we'd,
share.
yeah, we'd love to, if anyone ever needs anything, reach out. But, my advice to the guys is it's not about you.